Welcome to Move the Sticks. I am Bucky Brooks, and I'm sitting here with my man Lance Z. We've just finished night 2 of the 2025 NFL Draft. And Lance, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. There are a lot of dreams that are realized, but I think we would be remiss if we don't start with the biggest story of the day. Day 2, rounds 2 and 3 go. 5 quarterbacks have now been drafted, but when the 4th round opens on Saturday, Carolina quarterback Shedeur Sanders will still be waiting to hear his name called.
Yep, he'll still be waiting. And, it's a different conversation today than it was at the end of the day than it was at the beginning of the day. At the beginning of the day, it was football people saying, look at these silly people on social media arguing about how Shedeur Sanders was supposed to be a top 10 pick and they didn't watch tape and they didn't, and really he fell out, but that's for football reasons. Now, was there always a concern about, maybe how he interviewed? Sure. Is there going to be some concern for some teams about Deion Sanders and his, this looming specter of Deion if things don't go well? Maybe. But once we hit the second round, and Bucky, you and I talked about it off the air, there was a scenario where Shedeur Sanders could absolutely slide out of the second round.
We knew that.
Yeah, we knew that. And then if he slid out of the third, the thought was a second, then what's to keep him from sliding in the third? We did think Tyler Shuck could go ahead of him. That was possible. Once you got all the way to the midway through, once he got past the Pittsburgh Steelers
at 83,
you turned and said,
this
may be a wrap for him because Cleveland had passed on him multiple times.
They passed on him so many times that you couldn't envision them taking him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say the nail on the coffin, or when you really went, is when Dylan Gabriel, no disrespect to Dylan Gabriel,
right,
quarterback coming out of Oregon, when he's taken 94th overall by the Cleveland Browns, who had bypassed on an opportunity to take the quarterback, that's when you're like, hey, man, there's a scenario where he may not get drafted today, but also you're now beginning to wonder, is he going to get drafted, period? Because with the Raiders and the Browns bypassing them multiple times, the Saints seemingly getting their guy, the Giants have gotten their guy, the Seattle Seahawks take Jalen Milroe.
Who's left?
Like now it's a free fall where going into day 3 in the 4th round, if he goes in the 4th round, we talk about developmental prospect, anyone taking a guy where we're just throwing darts.
Mm-hmm.
To think about him being in that scenario where you're just throwing darts, where does he go? And the other thing, and look, it reminds me of the Tim Tebow thing, right? When Tim Tebow was out there and the specter of Tim Tebow joining your squad, so much noise, so much perceived distractions. Which team?
It was a distraction, though, don't you think, with Tim Tebow?
Sure.
Since every time we got sick as a fan, I was so sick. And a media member hearing about Tim Tebow every time, like, guys, this is not the story.
And so is that going to be the thing? Because when Shedeur Sanders, when he gets picked, is the first thing that happens, media members are going to say, does he have a chance to start? Do you have this? What kind of situation do you have? I'm looking at a situation where it has to be someone that's so entrenched as the starter that he's a non-factor when it comes to them bringing him in and doing that. And so it's a fun, and not a fun, but a very fascinating story to watch. I would say one that I don't know if I've ever seen a notable name like this experience this kind of slide when it wasn't a conversation going in.
Well, it's not medical, right? There's nothing
that we know of.
Nothing criminal. There's nothing medical that we know of. Now let's just tell it all. He didn't compete at all in the Shrine Game. Okay.
Right.
He didn't work out at the Combine. Okay. Didn't throw at the Combine. Not the first player not to do that. That's not that big a deal. Didn't do anything at the Big 12
Pro Day.
Okay. And then he finally had his own showcase day. I do think that the specter of everything being larger, about it being about Shedeur, Travis Hunter, Deion put lots of platitudes, and he won the Heisman Trophy.
He jumped out there and did everything.
He did that. But the other thing was, Deion always mentioned Travis every time he mentioned Shedeur. It's not like Travis, but there was something that felt like, there was a push that Shedeur was bigger than the team, and that's something that will really turn teams off. The fact that he went after his offensive line a year ago in a Twitch stream.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a assistant GM who told me that was a big turnoff for him because
Mm-hmm.
in the NFL you got to say it's your fault even when it's not your fault. Like I got to do a better job of getting rid of the ball.
Yep.
Because you're protecting your guys, because your offensive line, it's a brotherhood between the quarterback and the offensive line. And I think this is a more complicated and more nuanced conversation that you and I can have that the general public just really can't have it in social media settings. It requires a lot more conversation because there's a lot more that goes into it.
It's a lot of nuance. And back in the day, we would talk about the quarterback position being presidential in terms of being very regal in nature, very regal in how you handled yourself on the field, off the field, in press conferences, and those things. And Shedeur, is a very confident, very brash, very in your face. Like he's different. He grew up in the 7-on-7 era where these things are very commonplace.
Yeah.
Like the watch celebration. That's very commonplace. If you go to any 7-on-7 event, you see these kinds of things. But we're not necessarily used to seeing a quarterback who is like that. And I will say this, and it will be interesting to fast forward to 2026, and if Arch Manning is in the draft, and the things that we talk about in terms of Dion and the family and all of this other stuff, do you get the same kind of sense and sentiment? Because remember, the Manning family was very outspoken about Eli going to a place and those things. And early in the process, Dion talked about wanted to make sure that, hey, we won't go to these places. We want to go there and this. And the tables have turned. And you just wonder when that conversation came out there, how did coaches receive it? How did GMs and management officials receive it? And those things. And now the leverage isn't with the player. The leverage is with the team. And as we go into the fourth round, man, you are hopeful as opposed to a guy that is certain to make the team when you're a top prospect.
I can tell you from talking to NFL personnel people, there is a concern right now. This isn't a Shedeur. This is a general conversation. There is a concern right now with entitlement on the college level because of NIL, because it's gotten so out of control so fast. It's gone from 0 to 100 miles an hour. And the amount of money that's there and the stories you hear behind the scenes with players becoming really, really difficult, the ability to leave anytime you want, it's a constant state of free agency. There is a belief by NFL teams that players are becoming more difficult to deal with. And it really is only like the third year that we've seen NIL. So it's still very, very early. But I do think that you are going to see more and more teams who are going to try to figure out who the more entitled ones, I don't know if I want to say spoiled or whatever, but the guys who are in it for the NIL and who are in it for football. I believe Shedeur Sanders loves football. I think he loves football. On tape, to me, he's a second-round talent. He's the second-best quarterback in this draft. I think he's got his confidence to me is a huge plus. Now, some of it's too extra.
Oh,
it just is. I mean, let's just be real. Some of it is too much. You got to dial some of that back. I don't mind brash. I don't mind confident. I don't mind cocky. The Aaron Rodgers stuff, all that stuff. Baker Mayfield rubbed people the wrong way. You can do it when you're balling out on a high level in the NFL.
But it didn't impact Baker when it came to the draft.
No, it didn't.
Like it's impacted.
Well, and see, I heard stuff behind the scenes, like it seemed he left in the middle of the Senior Bowl. You know what I mean?
Like I mean,
that bothered me.
But he's not the first one. Joey Harrington has some stuff where he could have been hard to deal with. Didn't stop teams from taking him third overall. And I do understand.
Yep.
Talent brings tolerance, and we talked about him not having the elite tools and those things. But I'm just telling you, I never thought that it would be a situation where he falls. Can we get a third? And so, look, don't want it to overshadow like the night of so many guys realizing their dreams. But, man, we have to at least address what was. Look, early in the process, we were talking about two quarterbacks who was going to be number one. To have the guy who was in that conversation not only completely fall out of the first round, but to not be taken in the first three rounds, to me, it makes it a more significant story.
Yeah, and you and I have both been sensitive to the fact that good football players have not had enough conversation in this process leading up because
we talked about it.
Because everything's been Shedeur. And it's not fair to Cam Ward first and foremost. Cam Ward deserved way more consideration.
Did not get enough shine.
Did not get enough shine. This is different. Well, the conversation we're having now is, How did it happen, and what happens now? The reason it happened is going to be different for different teams. Some teams probably didn't like the football player as much. He's he's mobile in the pocket. He's not a fast escapability guy. He takes too many sacks, holds onto the ball too long. But there's been a lot of players have held
Man,
on to the ball.
there's a lot of players.
For everything that you can say, there's a counter to it. So that's why I think it's a little more complicated.
And my point is this: like when we talk about the league and everyone talks about these high standards, we have seen players like Tim Boyle play 7 years in the league, who was a player who didn't have nearly the accomplishments of Shedeur Sanders. You know what I'm saying? So like that's where
Nick Mullins.
I mean, Nick. I mean, like.
Their career backups. They just stay out of the Case Keenum. Well, Case.
But Case was a baller, though. Case was a baller.
Yeah. Case balled out.
And so that's the thing. And so we'll get to it. We'll see where it ends up on day 3. But I got to ask you, when you look at the first 3 rounds and you look at teams that have put in work, who are some of the teams that you're impressed with what they've been able to do so far?
Well, I like the Patriots had a philosophy, an idea of what they wanted to do. Had a conversation with an former NBA general manager, and I was talking about the team that he used to work for and what it was like. And he said, even though we had a great organization, the thing that bothered me was every once in a while we'd be on the draft class, and he said there's only 2 rounds for us. He said we'd be on the board, and all of a sudden there's hesitation in the room where we thought we were all on the same page. So I think that, and Bucky, you've been in those rooms. I think good organizations understand this is our philosophy, this is what we're doing, and you stick to it on draft day and you don't waffle. I look at the Patriots, and it's interesting because Mike Vrabel came in and brought who's his guy?
Ryan Cowden.
Yeah, Ryan Cowden. Elliott Wolf was already there. Alonzo Highsmith was already there.
Yeah.
So the 2 groups blended together, and it looks like they have a really ironed out, well thought out plan. Offensive tackle, first pick of the draft, 4th overall. They know they had to have tackled. They did it there. Travion Henderson got a terrific running back and an explosive playmaker in the 2nd round. In the 3rd round, they went and got a guy who can stretch the field, and Kyle Williams, silky smooth wide receiver. And then at the back end, they traded back, and they still were able to add Jared Wilson, an athletic center there. So 2 offensive linemen and then skill position players. I wouldn't be surprised if the 2nd round, they've got 3 picks in the 5th, 2 in the 7th, 1 in the 4th. They're going to mix and match and move up, I'm sure, at least once, maybe twice. But I'll bet you tomorrow's completely defense. And I think that's probably a philosophy and a discussion that they had in their meetings. I like that for the Patriots. They needed a lot of help, and I think they maneuvered around pretty well, and they did what they were supposed to do.
It's funny because I feel like this team always gets a lot of love on draft day or draft weekend, but the Baltimore Ravens – and we've been in this game long enough to know that the Baltimore Ravens do what they do. They just sit and pick. They wait for good players to fall. We always talk about draft boards being like snowflakes and that nobody has guys ranked in the same order. And the Baltimore Ravens appear to always, I would say, feast on others' mistakes. And so the fact that they're able to get Malachi Starks early in the 1st round, and then they come back and on day 2, like they get Mike Green.
Mike Green's a top 16, 17.
I mean, like he was the guy that we talked about being a top 20 pick, someone that we knew had sack production, led the country in sacks. You saw the feistiness. You saw him come off the edge, the physicality and toughness, all those things. And here you are in the 2nd round, and he's right there. And the Baltimore Ravens scooped him up. And you're just like, here they go again doing what they do. And then later they come and get Emory Jones, tackle from LSU, just another guy that kind of fits their thing. The one thing that always stands out, great organizations, they understand their identity and they always pick players that suit their identity.
And when you're strong and have strong leadership, you can take guys that, and Mike Green fell. There's some character stuff, but from what I understand, it's nothing that's going to I don't think there's a concern about the person, the type of player he is. They just got a discounted, from what I can tell, they got a discounted 1st rounder later in the 2nd round, and they don't overthink it. That's one of the things about the Ravens. Malachi Starks, you're not trying to, well, if we get Nick Emmanwori, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to be more multiple with our. They just said, how about we go get a Kirby Smart player who's a good tackler, who's mentally tough, and who fits the Raven way. And Nick Manwari has all this talent, but sometimes he turns it off a little bit. Like it can go off and on in terms of the motor. He's got to get himself, when he's properly motivated, man, that guy's a monster. Malachi Starks never turns it off. He's just ready to play all the time. And he's a Raven. And I think what you said
Play
is
like a
exactly
Raven. They
right.
know
Like
it,
they
man.
don't overthink things. They say, here's a good football player, take him. And when you have a strong locker room, you can also take a few more chances too. That's something else that should be noted. So, yeah, the Ravens did a great job. I think looking at the draft board, I made mention of the Texans going with Jaden Higgins in the second round. They got a tackle, Ariante Ursary, who we'll see how he plays. I have some concerns about him. He doesn't play as fluidly as he tests at tackle. Jalen Noel is really explosive slot receiver from Iowa State, and then Jalen Smith, the cornerback. And what's interesting there is the Texans are saying we need to get more weapons for C.J. Stroud. We lost Stephon Diggs. Tank Dell's out for this year, and who knows if he'll ever come back. And so the Texans immediately said, we're not waiting. We can't afford to piecemeal this over 2 years. We'll go get 2 wide receivers this year, and they're both going to have to play. I mean, John Mechie's going to have to fight for his job. Xavier Hutchinson, this guy's going to have to fight for his job. Justin Watson came in, who's a reliable 4th, 5th wide receiver. So Texans not only wanted more competitiveness at that position, competition at that position, I think they got these 2 guys to play a lot of snaps, to be honest with you. And when you're in the AFC, you got to deal with Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and teams that can put up a lot of points. And so Nick Caserio basically said, hey, we cannot sleep on wide receiver. We cannot wait until next year. We got to get him right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, they are doing a really good job of kind of loading up, doing it. We talk about the best teams understand who they are, and they make sure that they kind of stick to the script. And I'm going to say that, and it's funny for us to talk about the Dallas Cowboys in this vein, but they've done a really solid job of sticking to what really works for them. Early, the first night, we saw them get Tyler Booker, someone who's a straight bully at the point of attack. You see the video and those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then tonight, they go and get Donovan Ezaraku, who can come off the edge. They need pass rushing help. And
first, second type of talent.
Yeah,
also,
I mean, like
borderline first.
I mean, and you just see where, okay, the combinations are going to start to come and how they're going to be able to get after it. You think about Matt Eberflus coming back, and he wants to kind of get to playing the style where, hey, they're playing fast and they're getting after it, and it's simplistic. Ezaraku brings that energy. And then Siobhan Rivera, I mean, just being able to be their big corner. You think about that Tampa 2 style that they can jump into and some of those things, zone corner. And I just think about his size with Trayvon Diggs on the other side and the ball skills and the length and how they can challenge guys in different ways. To me, the Dallas Cowboys have just been rock solid when it comes to their picks.
Bears had 4 picks in the first 62. Colston and Loveland, we talked about in the first round. Luther Burden, another first-round discount player in the second round. I thought he was a first-round talent. I think you have to look past the short throws this year, and you have to go back and watch 2023 and 2024 intermediate and deep throws to see what he can be in an offense that's different than the dink and dunk, catch and run stuff that Missouri ran. Hey, it was great to take advantage of Burden's ability after the catch, but that's not all he is. I think he's capable of doing a lot more than that. And so, Caleb Williams is going to give him an opportunity to show that. And Roma Dunze being on one side is also going to give him a chance to, for the Bears to get creative, for Ben Johnson to get creative. Remember that all the offensive picks here, Ben Johnson, who I thought was a mastermind, I mean, I had a lot of respect for everything he did, his play calling, his vision for Jahmyr Gibbs and everything he did. He comes into the Bears and immediately grabs a different tight end not named Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, who I think is a more athletic, maybe a little higher ceiling pass catcher, and then Luther Burden, who, frankly, I thought was the best wide receiver not named Travis Hunter in this draft. So now also in the second, they got Ozzie Trapillo. I think he's a right tackle only, so I'm not sure. Right now, he'll probably play swing. They should be okay this year with Braxton Jones at left and Darnell Wright on the right side. But at some point, they're going to expect Trapilla to take over. So I do question whether or not he can play on the left side or if Darnell Wright can play on the left side. That would be a question I have. Shamar Turner, I like a lot. A little bit undersized as a 3 technique, but you remember another undersized 3 technique from a weight standpoint, Tommy from Oklahoma. Oh, Tommy Harris.
Tommy Harris. Oh,
yeah, Tommy Harris.
Man,
yeah, I'm going way back, but he was a 290-pound guy that could get up the field and disrupt. I think Shamar Turner is a really underrated player. I like Shamar Turner a lot. I think the Bears have done a nice job. You get 4 picks in the first 62, you better do a good job.
Let's go to the New York Giants. And even though they only made one selection tonight, I think it's the combination of who they added, Darius Alexander, to our front line that has been fortified with the pick of Abdul Carter. And then I think about Alexander, Carter, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns. The New York Giants are now cooking with gas on defense. And when the Giants have been the Giants, it's because their defense has led the way. I now see a front line that can impose their will on opponents with some of the size and athleticism and the attributes. And then, look, Jackson Dart, I understand Jackson Dart because Brian Daboll and Joe Shane both spent time in Buffalo. And when you have the kind of success that they each had in Buffalo with a quarterback like Josh Allen, I can see that kind of setting your North Star. That is kind of what you're looking for, physical quarterback that can run, that can do some things, that gives them Jackson Dart. So through 2 days, I think they're solid. Now, the quarterback has to play at a high level. But
we can have our own opinions, but we got to let them play.
Yeah, they're a much better team because they were able to kind of stick to build up the defense, and then they were able to get the quarterback that they wanted.
You know, Bucky, the Cardinals have a real boom-bust draft working right now. My 2 6.5 grade players, boom-bust grades, both landed on the Cardinals, Walter Nolan and Will Johnson. Walter Nolan is a really explosive 3-down player, but at A&M, there were questions that dogged him about his professionalism, so to speak, his work ethic off the field. Now, it was not challenged when he was on the field, but people I talked to over there just said, trying to get out of practice here and there, wanting to stay in the training room here and there. Why does this guy not practice and stuff like that? But it wasn't a football issue. There's nothing criminal with him. There's anything like that. But Walter Nolan went 16th, probably could have gone top 8, top 9, something like that. Maybe even higher, actually. I had an even higher grade. So he's there. Really talented, though. Will Johnson goes 47th. A little bit of a knee issue that is a consideration. Never ran a 40 time, and teams thought he's a little bit slow. Never ran a 40. So we're not sure there. Jordan Birch. Jordan Birch is your 3rd-round pick. He's 290 pounds, looks the part, but is not real, and he's a great athlete. Better rusher than run defender. I want him to be tougher at the point of attack as a run defender. I want him to show more grit and tenacity on a regular basis. If you don't have that in the NFL, you flame out quickly. Grit and tenacity are something that you just have to have. And that's something Jordan Birch is going to have. From a talent standpoint, off the charts. Cardinals' talent is off the charts. Consistency-wise, I would argue Nolan's very consistent. Will Johnson, when he played, was very consistent, but you got to worry about speed. And then Jordan Birch you got to light a fire on him. He's got to put a little glass in that diet, be a glass muncher, and be a little bit, and just be a little saltier, I think, to play in the NFL, because these are tough guys. It helps to have a little glass in your diet.
So it's funny because I know you know Chris Ballard well, and we've always been able to talk about Ballard likes the athletic freaks. And so we've always been to kind of identify the Indianapolis Colts. Well, I'm going to say John Snyder and the Seattle Seahawks, they certainly like to drink from that same water trough. When you look at what they've been able to do, like first, they go and get Grace Abel in the first round. So that was Thursday night. But then to come back and you look at who they've taken today. Nick Emenwari from South Carolina, freak show athlete, put on a show at the Combine, was really the star of the Combine, king of the Combine, we can call him. Elijah Arroyo. Think about the talent, the tools that he brings to the tight end position and how he can be that flex tight end to get open down the middle of the field for Sam Darnold. And then you top it off with Jalen Milroe, who is the freak show of all freak shows at quarterback. The talent and the tools were there in terms of, man, he is an elite running back playing quarterback with big
No
time
doubt.
arm talent in terms of being able to push it down the field. John Snyder is banking on the traits. These tools are going to translate into production, and that is going to help us get over the top. And you see it, particularly in their day 2 picks. They went big on the prototype.
Yeah, I thought they had a good day. And Jalen Milroe's just so intriguing to me because look, I don't love him as a quarterback based on what I saw. I thought he was more like a 4th-round pick, a backup. But the thing that you can't handicap is players who have dynamic speed. Like you can't game plan for it defensively. You can, but it's more on the college level, on the high school level, on the pro level. You can't really do that as long as you're not too predictable as an offense. It's really hard to handle quarterbacks who contain, break the pocket, or can run because nowadays teams will just direct snap and it turns into power and they're around the corner. And I mean, Jalen Milroe could turn into a first down getter when you're in 3rd and short as a rookie. They could do something like that with it. I'm not convinced that you can't run some Taysom Hill type stuff with him early on in his career and just find ways to get him the ball and see if he can be explosive. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think like he's certainly worth developing.
Yeah,
seeing if you can develop the footwork, the timing, the decision making, but he's just a special athlete. You know, Bucky, when you got the 5-star and you see it, it's 5-star ATH coming out of high school. Everyone wants to draft. Everyone wants to recruit those guys.
Yeah.
You get the 5-star ATH, and we will figure it out when we get in. Maybe it'll be a corner. Maybe it'll be a quarterback. Maybe it'll be a wide receiver, running back. He's like one of these special 5-star athletes that, yeah, he's a quarterback, but we just want him in the building because we got to figure out how we're going to use him. We just know there aren't many like him. There's maybe been 2 other ones, Vic and Lamar Jackson. I don't know anyone else that runs like those guys.
No, and the thing is, I would ask Alabama, I don't know why they didn't run them more, to be honest.
I'm with you.
That's the thing. Like, when people make the comparison to Lamar Jackson had 1,500-yard seasons back-to-back. Jalen Milroe didn't touch the ball enough to fully max out his running skills, and I would like to see what the Seattle Seahawks are able to do. The good thing about their situation with Drew Lock already in the building to back up Sam Darnold, this is one where they actually have an opportunity to play and have fun. They have a chance to really develop him. He can be on the scout team, kind of working and being the other team quarterback while also working on his game. And then next year we can kind of see if he can be a special player. But you're right. You would like to think they want to put the ball in his hands and see if they can get something out of him. Last team that I want to bring up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers, I just love it. Look, I'm DB. Tonight they were able to get Benjamin Morrison, and then they get Jacob Perry.
I love it. Love both those guys, yeah.
Both of those guys, to me, are plug-and-play starters in any situation. And in Todd Bowles' defense, where they want to zone blitz, they want to bring pressure, they want to hang these guys in these match zones where they're playing 3 deep and some of this other exotic stuff, both of these guys not only have the instincts and awareness and high IQ to do it, but, man, their physical tools should allow them to have a lot of success in that defense.
And what about my last one's going to be Darren. It's pronounced Mogi, right?
Yes, from
the Jets.
New York Jets.
He and Aaron Glenn, the new head coach, I thought so far have done a fantastic job. They get Armand Membu, who is, I think, a plug-and-play starting right tackle, to position they really need. Mason Taylor, who I loved, tight end out of LSU that I think will come in and immediately help Justin Fields there. And then Azareye'h Thomas, a physical press man corner who's tough to throw over and who is, can really deal with the slower wide receiver. If you're not a quick, shifty wide receiver, if you let him travel with big wide receivers, that's one of those big wide personal matchup guy. I would not have him on one side, Buck. I would travel him if you're going to play man-to-man, and make sure you keep him on the right kind of matchups. There's going to be some matchups that aren't great for him, I think, but he's pretty good at press, at getting his hands on people and slowing them down. So I think the Jets did a really nice job with their 3 picks they had, a first, a second, and a third. But I thought they got really solid value and early contributors from all three of those guys.
The big thing with the Jets, I want to see Aaron Glenn had talked about wanting to have that 3-headed monster at running back. Maybe they find a guy that they can throw into the rotation, because with Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, if you can find another guy, they really want to get after it and run the football and be physical with Justin Fields, who's we'll call him half a running back. They can be pretty dynamic
Yeah, he is half a
offensively
running
with
back.
their running game.
Yeah. Jets they could be interesting next year. It's not like they don't have talent.
Mm-mm.
The Jets have talent. They picked 7th because things just fell apart on them the last couple of years. But the Jets could be a problem by next year if Justin Fields, can have really an above average year. So especially if they keep drafting like this. One team to keep an eye on for tomorrow, I think, is going to be the San Francisco 49ers. They have a billion draft picks. They've got 11 picks in this draft. They've already picked 4 players. They got 2 fourths, 2 fifths, 3 sevenths. 3 sevenths. They're not going to use 2 fourths and 2 fifths. They're going to figure out exactly who they want, and they will use those draft picks to get 4 picks will turn into 2, and they'll get 2 guys that they love. That's what they're going to do.
Let's see if there's anybody that is available, like anybody that you're brewing on that you think could be or should be coming off the board pretty quickly.
Well, Bucky, I would say, I'll start at running back. Dylan Sampson and Bayshaw Tootin are 2 running backs that I think should come off the board fairly quickly. Actually, this is a great running back draft. You got Trevor Etienne and Jaden Blue, 2 guys who can make explosive plays out of the backfield. Trevor Etienne, I think, is a little more dynamic in terms of 3 downs. Cam Scatterbo, everyone's favorite. I know you're a fan. I am too. I think he's a good football player. Every time you watch him, he's the hardest guy to tackle. It's Ashton Genty and then Cam Scatterbo. Those are the 2 hardest running backs to tackle in college football. I think those are guys to keep in mind, to keep an eye on. Where will Quinn Ewers and Shedeur Sanders fall? And Kyle McCord, Will Howard, Riley Leonard. These are name guys. It's going to be interesting to see where they end up on the defensive side of the board. I think guys to keep an eye on would include Danny Stutzman, good linebacker, very good tackler from Oklahoma. Josh Farmer, the big defensive tackle from Florida State, 4th round's about where he should go. Braden Swinson, pass rusher from LSU, and Darren Sorrell, pass rusher from Texas. These are some of the guys. I can tell you, the defensive tackle, this is going to be filled with defensive tackles tomorrow, edge rushers. We'll see a big run on the running backs, and you're about to see a ton of linebackers start coming off the board. We're going to be here for every pick of every round. We're going to see a lot of linebackers' names, a lot of defensive tackles' names, and a lot of running back names.
A lot of running backs. Day 3 is about developmental players, special team standouts, guys that are going to have to make the team by doing it on the 3rd phase of the game. And so, we look forward to everyone coming back. We're going to have a wrap-up show at the end of the weekend where we talk about all the things that took place over draft weekend. Until then, make sure you check out all the coverage, NFL Media, NFL Network, NFL.com. Until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. That's Lance Z. And this was Move the Sticks.